Natasha tapped her fingers against the cold, sterile surface of the doctor's desk, her heart pounding in her chest. Benny sat beside her, his hand firmly clutching hers, a silent promise of support. Dr. Carson, their trusted physician, sat across from them, her expression soft but grave. Natasha felt her stomach churn as the doctor spoke, her voice calm, yet heavy, with the weight of unwelcome news. "I'm afraid the tests reveal some complications," Dr. Carson began. "It appears that your hormone levels and ovarian health present significant challenges to conception. While it's not impossible, the chances are lower than we'd hoped." Natasha's mind spiraled. Words like complications, challenges, and lower chances echoed in her head. She glanced at Benny, hoping to find some solace in his eyes, but the furrow in his brow only mirrored her growing despair. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, but it did little to stop the tears that welled up in her eyes. As the doctor explained potential treatment options, hormone therapies, IVF, and adoption, Natasha nodded mechanically, barely absorbing the information. It felt surreal. She had dreamed of being a mother for as long as she could remember. Holding her baby in her arms, reading bedtime stories, and singing lullabies had always seemed like a certain chapter in her life. Now, that chapter felt as though it had been ripped from her book entirely. The car ride home was silent, save for the hum of the engine. Benny occasionally glanced at Natasha, his eyes filled with concern. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past her, feeling as though the world was moving forward while she was stuck in place. When they pulled into the driveway, Natasha stepped out without a word and went straight to their bedroom. The door clicked softly behind her. For days, Natasha barely left the room. The vibrant woman Benny had fallen in love with, the one who laughed until her sides hurt, who filled their home with joy, seemed to have retreated into a shell of sorrow. She spent hours curled up in bed, the weight of her dreams slipping further away with each tear that soaked her pillow. Benny tried everything, making her favorite meals, sitting with her in silence, holding her when she cried. But no matter what he did, her pain seemed impenetrable. One afternoon, Natasha sat by the window staring out at the garden Benny had lovingly tended. The sight of a small bird perched on the fence caught her attention. It chirped a light melody, fluttering its wings as if trying to cheer her up. She watched it for a while, something stirring deep within her. She realized that even the tiniest of creatures had their place in the world, their purpose. Perhaps her path to motherhood wouldn't be what she had envisioned, but maybe, just maybe, it was still a path worth walking. Later that evening, Natasha emerged from the bedroom, her eyes still red but her shoulders straighter. She found Benny in the kitchen, his back to her as he washed dishes. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his back. "We'll find a way," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Benny turned, wrapping his arms around her, holding her tightly. "Yes, we will," he said, his voice steady. Together, their journey was far from over, but in that moment, they found something they hadn't felt in days: hope. Over the next few weeks, Natasha began to pull herself together. The pain lingered, like a dull ache in her chest, but she forced herself to take small steps forward. She turned to research, diving into books, forums, and medical journals late into the night. The more she learned about fertility treatments, surrogacy, and alternative paths to parenthood, the more hope she began to feel. One evening, she eagerly shared her findings with Benny as they sat on the couch. "Did you know there's a new procedure that could improve our chances? It's a bit experimental, but the success rate is climbing every year," she said, her eyes lighting up. Benny nodded absently, barely looking up from the television. "That's great, Nat," he muttered, his tone flat. Natasha's excitement deflated. She tried again the next night, this time bringing up a support group she'd found online. "There are so many couples who've gone through this. They've shared their journeys, and it's incredible to see what's possible. Maybe we could join and—" "Natasha," Benny interrupted, his voice sharper than she expected. "I don't need a support group. Can we not talk about this right now? Her heart sank. She didn't press further that evening, but as the days turned into weeks, she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Benny was spending more time at work, staying later than usual. When he was home, he seemed lost in his own thoughts, retreating to his workshop or scrolling on his phone. One night, as they lie in bed, Natasha stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She couldn't take it anymore. She rolled over to face him. "Benny," she said softly, "what's going on? You've been so distant." Benny sighed, staring up at the ceiling for a moment before turning to her. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant. "I'm 35, Natasha. By the time we have a kid, if we even can, I'll be pushing 40. I want to be able to run around with my kid, play catch, coach their little league team. What if I'm too old for that?" His words stung. Natasha sat up, her brow furrowing. "Benny, 40 isn't old. Plenty of people have kids later in life. Besides, there are other options. We could adopt. We could—" "It's not the same," Benny cut in. "It's not the same as having a child that's ours, biologically ours. I don't know if I can do this, Natasha." The finality in his tone sent a shiver through her. "So, what are you saying? That you're giving up?" Benny didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned away from her, his silence louder than any words. For the first time, Natasha began to question the foundation of their marriage. If Benny couldn't walk this path with her, what did that mean for their future? Was their love strong enough to withstand this rift? Or was this the beginning of the end? She lay awake long after Benny had fallen asleep, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. For the first time in her life, she wondered if the dream she'd held for so long, of a family, a child, and a happy home, was slipping through her fingers, not because of biology, but because of the growing distance between her and the man she had once believed was her forever. Natasha stared at the large envelope in her hands, her fingers trembling as she held it. The bold letters across the front read, "Law Offices of Grant and Myers." A wave of nausea washed over her as she tore it open, her heart pounding in her chest. She unfolded the papers, scanning the first few lines. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." The words blurred before her eyes. She read them again, as if repeating them would make them mean something else. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the porch steps, the papers falling into her lap. It felt surreal, as though the ground beneath her had shifted, and she was free falling into an abyss. Benny had filed for divorce. Tears streamed down her face as a sob escaped her throat. For weeks, she had held on to hope, believing the distance between them was temporary, that Benny just needed time to process his feelings. She had given him space, taken his silence as a sign of inner turmoil rather than abandonment. Now she realized how wrong she had been. That evening, Natasha drove to Benny's parents' house, her emotions oscillating between anger, confusion, and heartbreak. She needed answers. She needed to understand how the man she had loved for years could walk away without so much as a conversation. When she arrived, Benny's mother, Clara, greeted her at the door. The older woman's face softened with concern as she saw Natasha's tear-streaked cheeks. "Natasha, what's wrong?" Clara asked, guiding her inside. Natasha held up the papers, her hands still shaking. "He filed for divorce, Clara. I didn't even see it coming. How could he do this? Why didn't he tell me?" Clara's expression turned somber. She sighed, leading Natasha to the couch. "Sweetheart, I don't know what's going on in Benny's mind. He's been spending a lot of time here, but he hasn't said much. I've tried to talk to him, but he just shuts down." Natasha wiped her eyes, frustration boiling beneath her sadness. "I've done everything I could to give him space, to be patient, to support him. And this is how he repays me?" Clara reached for Natasha's hand, her grip warm and steady. "Benny's always been stubborn, and sometimes he runs away from things he doesn't know how to handle. I know this hurts, but maybe he just needs time to realize what he's throwing away. Natasha nodded, though her heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. What if he doesn't realize, Clara? What if this is it? Clara hesitated, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You'll find a way to move forward, Natasha. You're strong, stronger than you think. But for now, give him space. If there's a chance to salvage this, it'll come when he's ready. Later that night, Natasha sat alone in the quiet of her home, staring at the divorce papers on the coffee table. Memories of their life together flooded her mind. Their first date, their wedding day, the nights they'd stayed up dreaming about their future. Now, all of it felt like a distant echo of a life she no longer recognized. She picked up her phone, her finger hovering over Benny's number. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but another part of her knew that nothing she said would change what he'd done. For the first time in weeks, Natasha stopped trying to hold it together. She let herself cry, mourning not just the loss of the family she dreamed of, but the loss of the man she thought she'd spend the rest of her life with. And as the tears fell, a quiet resolve began to take root. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't let Benny's decision define her. If he wasn't willing to fight for their marriage, she would fight for herself. The crisp breeze rustled through the trees, and Natasha pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as she sat on the bench near the pond. The ducks glided gracefully across the water, their tranquil movements soothing her restless mind. It had been months since the divorce was finalized, and though she had started to rebuild her life, there were still moments when the weight of it all pressed down on her. Lost in her thoughts, she was startled by a small ball rolling up to her feet. She looked up and saw a little girl, no older than 7, running toward her with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry," the girl called out, stopping in front of her. She looked at Natasha with wide, curious eyes. "I didn't mean to hit you." Natasha bent down, picking up the ball and handing it to the girl. "It's okay," she said with a soft smile. The little girl hesitated, staring at Natasha intently. "My name is Megan. Why are you so sad?" Natasha blinked, surprised by the question. "Why do you think I'm sad?" she asked gently. Megan tilted her head, her blonde curls bouncing with the motion. "Because your eyes look like they're unhappy. That's what my dad says when I'm sad. My eyes tell him." Natasha's smile faltered for a moment, and her heart squeezed at the child's innocent insight. Before she could respond, a man approached them, his pace hurried but his expression warm. "Megan, we've talked about asking people too many questions," the man said, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. He turned to Natasha, an apologetic smile on his face. "I'm sorry about that. She's very curious." Natasha looked up at him, and for a moment, something about him felt familiar. She studied his features: kind hazel eyes, a sharp jawline, and an air of quiet confidence. Then it clicked. "Hampton?" she said, her tone tinged with surprise. The man smiled, recognition dawning on his face. "Natasha? Wow, it's been forever. We had history and science together, right?" Natasha nodded, a smile breaking through her surprise. "That's right. I remember you sitting in the back of class, always making jokes." Hampton chuckled. "And I remember you always having the right answer. It's great to see you. How have you been?" For the next half hour, Natasha and Hampton talked while Megan chased ducks and tossed her ball nearby. They reminisced about their school days, laughing over old memories, and Natasha felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hampton told her about his life since school, his work as a contractor, raising Megan as a single dad after his wife passed away a few years ago. Natasha shared a little about her recent struggles, carefully skimming over the details of her divorce, but admitting she was starting over. "You've been through a lot," Hampton said, his tone gentle. "But you're still here, still smiling. That says a lot about you." Natasha felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's been hard, but I'm trying to find my way." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Megan ran back to them, clutching her ball. "Dad, can we come back tomorrow? I like it here." Hampton glanced at Natasha, his eyes softening. "That depends. Natasha, would you like some company tomorrow? Megan seems to have taken a liking to you." Natasha hesitated, a small smile playing at her lips. "I think I'd like that." As they exchanged numbers and parted ways, Natasha felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Perhaps life had taken an unexpected turn, but sitting there by the pond, she realized that new beginnings could come when she least expected them. 2 weeks after their chance meeting at the pond, Natasha was curled up on her couch with a book when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw Hampton's name. A small smile crept across her face as she answered. "Hi, Hampton," she said, her tone light. "Hey, Natasha," Hampton replied, his voice warm and casual. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all. What's up?" There was a slight pause before Hampton continued. "So, Megan's spending the weekend with her grandparents. It's been a while since I've had a little time to myself, and I was wondering." He hesitated briefly. "Would you like to hang out? Maybe grab dinner or something?" Natasha blinked in surprise. "Oh," she said, caught off guard. "I'd like that. Are you sure you don't have other plans?" Hampton chuckled. "Most of my friends are married, and let's just say their idea of hanging out usually involves a lot of kid talk. Don't get me wrong, I love being a dad, but I think I could use a break from parenting discussions for a night." Natasha laughed softly. "I understand. Parenting free zone, got it." "Great," Hampton said, the relief in his voice evident. "I'll pick you up around 7? "That works for me," Natasha agreed, feeling a flutter of anticipation she hadn't felt in a long time. Natasha found herself standing in front of her closet, debating what to wear. It wasn't a date, she reminded herself. It was just 2 old friends catching up. Still, she wanted to look nice. She finally settled on a simple, knee-length dress and let her hair fall in soft waves around her shoulders. When Hampton arrived, he greeted her with a broad smile. "You look great," he said, his hazel eyes sparkling. "Thank you," Natasha replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Hampton had chosen a small, cozy Italian restaurant in town. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, with soft music playing in the background and candles flickering on the tables. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, they talked about everything, from their careers to their favorite books and movies. For the first time in months, Natasha felt herself relax completely. Hampton was easy to talk to, his humor and kindness making her feel at ease. He shared stories about his life as a single dad, and she found herself laughing more than she had in a long time. "You know," Hampton said, after a pause, swirling his wine and his glass, "I almost forgot what it feels like to just have a normal adult conversation. No interruptions, no bedtime routines. It's refreshing." Natasha smiled. "I get it. It's nice to feel like yourself again, even if it's just for a little while." Hampton leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I'm glad I called you. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hang out, but this feels right. Easy." Natasha's heart skipped a beat. She met his gaze, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "I'm glad you called too," she said softly. "I didn't realize how much I needed this." As the night went on, the conversation flowed effortlessly, and Natasha couldn't help but notice how comfortable she felt in Hampton's presence. When he drove her home later that evening, he walked her to her door, pausing before she went inside. "Thanks for tonight, Natasha," he said, his voice low. "I had a great time." "Me too," she replied, smiling up at him. For a moment, they lingered, the silence between them filled with unspoken possibilities. As Natasha closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a spark of hope, a feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, her story was far from over. Megan burst through the front door, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders, her face lighting up when she saw her father in the living room. "Daddy, I'm home," she shouted, running to hug him. Hampton scooped her up, spinning her around as she giggled. "Hey, sweetheart, did you have fun with Grandma and Grandpa?" "Yep, we went to the park, baked cookies, and Grandpa let me stay up late to watch a movie," Megan said, her eyes sparkling. Then, tilting her head, she asked, "What did you do while I was gone?" Hampton set her down and grinned. "Well, I hung out with an old friend." Megan's brow furrowed for a moment before realization dawned. "Was it Natasha? I met her first, you know." Hampton chuckled. "Yes, it was Natasha. You're right, you did meet her first." "Then when do I get a play date with her?" Megan asked, crossing her arms in mock seriousness. "She was nice. I think we'd be good friends." Hampton laughed, ruffling her curls. "You know what? I think you're right. How about we invite Natasha over for a tea party, just for you?" Megan's eyes widened. "Yes, let's do it. Can we have cookies too?" The following Saturday, Natasha arrived at Hampton's house with a plate of homemade cookies in hand. Megan greeted her at the door, bouncing with excitement. "Natasha, you came!" Megan exclaimed, grabbing her hand and leading her inside. Hampton appeared from the kitchen, smiling warmly. "Thanks for coming. I hope you're ready for an official tea party hosted by Miss Megan herself." Natasha laughed. "I wouldn't miss it." The living room had been transformed into a whimsical tea party setup, complete with a small table draped in a pink tablecloth, toy teacups, and an assortment of cookies and tiny sandwiches. Megan insisted Natasha sit beside her, and they spent the next hour sipping imaginary tea, chatting about Megan's favorite books, and giggling over her creative storytelling. When the tea party concluded, Megan declared it was time for her favorite meal. "Pizza," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Some Luigi's, Daddy. Can we go?" Hampton glanced at Natasha. "Megan's favorite spot in town. Would you like to join us?" Natasha hesitated for a moment, touched by the invitation. "I'd love to." Luigi's was a cozy, family-friendly pizzeria with checkered tablecloths and the smell of freshly baked dough wafting through the air. Megan chatted non-stop as they waited for their pizza, animatedly telling Natasha all about her school projects and her favorite toys. When the pizza arrived, Megan took a big bite and grinned. "This is the best pizza in the whole world, right, Daddy?" Hampton nodded, smiling at her. "It's pretty great. What do you think, Natasha?" Natasha laughed, savoring her first bite. "I think you might be right, Megan." As the evening went on, Natasha felt a warmth she hadn't felt in ages. Watching Hampton interact with Megan, the love and patience he showed her made her heart swell. It was a glimpse into a kind of happiness she thought she might never experience again. After they finished eating, Megan declared it the best day ever and fell asleep in the car on the ride home. When they arrived back at Hampton's house, he carried Megan to her room and returned to find Natasha waiting by the door. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "I had a wonderful time." Hampton smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you for coming. Megan wasn't the only one who enjoyed having you here." Natasha felt her cheeks flush as she stepped outside. As she walked to her car, she couldn't help but smile. Something was blossoming between her and Hampton, a connection that felt genuine and promising. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something special again. The following morning, as Hampton poured cereal into Megan's bowl, she looked up at him with her usual wide-eyed curiosity. "Daddy," she began, her tone serious for a 7-year-old. "Do you like Natasha?" Hampton paused mid-pour, startled by the question. He set the cereal box down, carefully considering how to respond. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" he said, his voice calm but curious. Megan shrugged, swirling her spoon in the milk. "Because you smile a lot when she's around, and you don't usually do that with other people. So, do you like her?" Hampton let out a soft chuckle, sitting down across from her. Well, Natasha is a very nice person. And I enjoy spending time with her. She's kind, smart, and fun to be around. So yes, I do like her. Megan's face lit up. I knew it. She likes you too. I can tell. Hampton tilted his head, smiling. Oh, you can tell, can you? And how's that? Megan grinned mischievously. She looks at you like you're a superhero. That's what Grandma says Mom used to do. Hampton's smile faltered for a brief moment, his heart aching at the mention of Megan's late mother. But he quickly recovered, reaching out to tousle her hair. You've got quite the eye for these things, huh? Megan nodded confidently. Yep, so are you going to marry her? Hampton nearly choked on his coffee, laughing nervously. Whoa, slow down there, Megan. It's not that simple. Why not? You like her? She likes you? And she makes cookies, Megan declared as though her logic was unassailable. Hampton smiled softly, leaning across the table. It's a little more complicated than that, sweetheart. But I promise, if there's anything you need to know, I'll tell you. Deal? Megan considered this for a moment before nodding. Deal. But if you like her, you should tell her. Grandma says it's important to be honest about your feelings. Hampton chuckled again, shaking his head. You're wise beyond your years, you know that? Megan beamed. I know. Later that evening, Hampton found himself reflecting on Megan's words. Did he like Natasha? The answer was clear. Yes, he did. But it wasn't just a simple attraction. There was something about Natasha, her strength, her warmth, her ability to connect with Megan so effortlessly, that made him feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Still, he hesitated. After everything he'd been through, was it too soon to let someone in? Was Natasha ready for this after her own heartbreak? He didn't want to rush things, especially when Megan was involved. But as he thought about Natasha's laughter, her kindness, and the way she had seamlessly fit into their lives during the tea party and pizza night, he couldn't deny that there was something special between them. Taking a deep breath, Hampton made a decision. He'd let things unfold naturally, but he wouldn't let fear stop him from exploring what might be possible. And maybe, just maybe, Megan was right. It was time to start being honest about his feelings. Hampton took a deep breath as he smoothed down his shirt, standing outside Natasha's apartment. Tonight he was going to take a chance. The tea party and pizza night had only solidified his growing feelings for her, and he knew it was time to see if there was truly something between them. When Natasha opened the door, she greeted him with a warm smile, looking radiant in a simple yet elegant dress. You look amazing, Hampton said, his voice soft but genuine. Thank you, Natasha replied, her cheeks flushing. You don't look so bad yourself. They drove to a cozy, upscale restaurant Hampton had chosen for the occasion. He had hoped the intimate setting would allow them to talk and connect on a deeper level. As they walked inside, Hampton felt a quiet confidence. This felt right, like the beginning of something special. But everything changed in an instant. As they turned a corner to approach their table, Natasha froze. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes locked onto a familiar figure, seated just a few feet away. Benny, her ex-husband, and sitting beside him, laughing and holding his hand, was a visibly pregnant woman. Natasha's stomach churned. The blood drained from her face, and before Hampton could say anything, she turned and bolted out of the restaurant. The sound of the door slamming shut behind her echoed in her ears as she stumbled onto the sidewalk, gasping for air. Tears streamed down her face as she leaned against the wall, trying to process what she had just seen. Natasha, Hampton's voice called out, filled with concern. He quickly caught up to her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. What happened? Are you okay? Natasha shook her head, unable to form words. She felt like her chest was caving in, the weight of everything she had tried to move past crashing down on her. Hampton stepped in front of her, his eyes searching hers. "Talk to me," he said softly. "Please." After a moment, Natasha nodded, wiping her tears. "Let's go back to my place," she whispered. "I can't do this here." Back at her apartment, Natasha sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. Hampton sat beside her, giving her space but remaining close enough to offer comfort. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "That was Benny," she said, her voice cracking. "The man at the restaurant. The one with the pregnant woman." Hampton frowned. "Your ex-husband?" Natasha nodded, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. "I thought I was over it. I really did. But seeing him like that, with her..." She buried her face in her hands. It just brought everything back. Hampton waited patiently, his expression calm but concerned. "Do you want to talk about it?" "You don't have to, but if it'll help, I'm here." Natasha hesitated, then nodded slowly. She had kept the details of her divorce bottled up for so long, afraid to relive the pain. But something about Hampton's presence made her feel safe. "We were married for 6 years, she began, her voice quiet but steady. "We started trying to have a baby a couple of years ago, but it wasn't happening. I thought it was just bad timing at first, but then we went to the doctor, and I found out." She paused, swallowing hard. "I found out I had complications. My chances of getting pregnant were slim." Hampton listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face. "It crushed me," Natasha continued. "Having kids was all I ever wanted, and suddenly that dream felt impossible. I was devastated, but I thought we could work through it together. I thought Benny would support me, that we'd find another way." Her voice grew shakier as she spoke. But instead, he started pulling away. He stopped talking to me, spending more time at his parents' house. One day, I came home to find divorce papers in the mail. No explanation, no conversation. Just papers. Hampton's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "I tried to talk to him, to understand why he was giving up on us, but he wouldn't answer my calls or messages. Eventually, I signed the papers because I didn't know what else to do. I told myself I'd move on, but seeing him tonight, seeing that he's starting a family with someone else," her voice broke, and she covered her face again. "It feels like he took everything I wanted and gave it to someone else." Hampton reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Natasha, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice low and full of empathy. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." Natasha looked up at him, her eyes red and puffy. "I thought I was okay. I really did. But I don't know how to let go of this pain." Hampton's gaze softened. "You're allowed to feel this way. What he did to you was cruel, and it's going to take time to heal. But you're stronger than you realize. I've seen it." Natasha shook her head. "I don't feel strong." "You are," Hampton said firmly. "You've been through so much, but you're still here. You're still trying. That's strength, Natasha." She stared at him, her heart aching but touched by his words. "Thank you," she whispered, "for listening, for being here." Hampton nodded, offering a small smile. "You don't have to go through this alone, you know. I'm here for you. And so is Megan." Natasha managed a faint smile. "Megan, she's such a sweet girl. You're lucky to have her." "I am," Hampton agreed. "But she's lucky to have met you too. You're good with her, Natasha. You're good." For the first time that evening, Natasha felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she was grateful for Hampton's kindness and understanding. As they sat together on the couch, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the heater, Natasha realized that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to heal. And perhaps, with time, she might even find happiness again. Hampton looked at Natasha, his expression sincere, as they sat on her couch in the quiet of the evening. "Natasha," he began softly, "I would like to see where this is going. I care about you, a lot, but I know you've been through so much and I don't want to rush you." Natasha's heart skipped a beat. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I like that too," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "But I'm afraid of opening myself up like that again, only to have it all fall apart." Hampton reached out and gently took her hand. "That's okay," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. We don't have to figure everything out right now. Let's take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just being us. His words felt like a balm to Natasha's heart, and she managed a small smile. One day at a time, she repeated, feeling a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few months, Natasha and Hampton grew closer. Their connection deepened with every shared moment, every heartfelt conversation, and every quiet evening spent together. Hampton's kindness and patience allowed Natasha to heal, and she found herself falling for him in ways she never thought possible after her divorce. Megan, too, became a big part of Natasha's life. The little girl adored Natasha and often declared her to be her best friend. Whether it was baking cookies, playing games, or sharing stories at bedtime, Natasha found joy in Megan's presence. And, to her surprise, it reignited her dream of motherhood in a way that felt different, but no less meaningful. Hampton noticed the change in Natasha. She laughed more, smiled brighter, and seemed lighter with each passing day. But as much as he cherished their growing bond, he couldn't ignore the part of him that wanted more. He knew Natasha was still healing, but he couldn't help but wonder if she ever envisioned a future with him. A life where they were more than just two people in love. One evening, after Megan had fallen asleep, Hampton and Natasha were sitting on the back porch of his house, a blanket draped over their laps to keep out the autumn chill. The stars glittered overhead, and a quiet hum of crickets filled the air. Hampton took a deep breath, his nerves bubbling just beneath the surface. "Can I ask you something?" he said, breaking the comfortable silence. Natasha looked over at him, her eyes warm and curious. "Of course." Hampton hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Have you ever thought about getting married again?" The question hung in the air, and Natasha's heart skipped a beat. She didn't answer right away, her gaze shifting to the stars above. "Honestly," she said after a long pause, "I'm not sure. After everything that happened with Benny, the idea of marriage felt impossible, like something I couldn't trust anymore." Hampton nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand," he said. "But do you think it's something you'd consider? Not just in general, but with me?" Natasha's breath caught in her throat. She turned to look at him, her heart pounding. "With you?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Hampton nodded again, his hazel eyes steady and full of emotion. "I've been thinking about this a lot, Natasha. About us, about what we have. I love you, and I love the life we've started to build together. I know it's not something you take lightly, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't mean it. But I can't help wondering what our lives could look like, together, as a family." Natasha's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from sadness. Her heart swelled with a mix of love and fear, the two emotions intertwining in a way that left her breathless. She reached out and took Hampton's hand, squeezing it tightly. "I love you too," she said, her voice trembling. "More than I ever thought I could love someone again. And I've thought about it, about what it would be like to share my life with you and Megan. But the idea of marriage still scares me. I'm afraid of failing again, of losing everything." Hampton leaned closer, his voice gentle. "You're not going to lose everything, Natasha. I'm not Benny. I would never walk away from you no matter what. But I understand your fear, and I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel, that I see a future with you, and it's a future I want more than anything." Natasha wiped a tear from her cheek, her heart full of gratitude for the man sitting beside her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being patient with me, for understanding." "Always," Hampton said, pulling her into a warm embrace. Over the next few weeks, Natasha couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. Hampton's words lingered in her mind, filling her with both hope and doubt. But as time went on, she realized that the life she was building with Hampton and Megan felt more solid and real than anything she'd ever known. Slowly, the fear that had once consumed her began to give way to something else: trust. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Natasha turned to Hampton and took his hand. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice steady. "About our future." Hampton looked at her, his eyes filled with both curiosity and hope. "I want that future too," Natasha said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm still scared, but I don't want to let that fear stop me from having something beautiful with you." Hampton's face lit up with a smile, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "You have no idea how happy that makes me," he said, his voice full of emotion. As they held each other, Natasha realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't looking back at the pain of her past. Instead, she was looking forward to a future filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a new beginning. One crisp autumn evening, after dinner, Hampton sat down with Megan in the living room. The soft hum of the television played in the background, but his focus was entirely on his daughter, who was sprawled on the floor coloring a picture of a duck. "Megan," he began gently, his tone soft but serious. Megan glanced up from her artwork. "Yeah, Daddy? Can we talk about something important?" he asked, sitting cross-legged on the rug beside her. Megan sat up, curiosity lighting her face. "Sure. Is it about Natasha?" Hampton chuckled, amazed at how perceptive his little girl was. "It is," he admitted. "You know how much time we've been spending with Natasha, right?" Megan nodded enthusiastically. "Uh-huh. I like her. She's nice and she makes the best cookies. Did you know she promised to teach me how to make her chocolate chip ones?" "I do know that," Hampton said, smiling. "I like her too, a lot. And I've been thinking, how would you feel about Natasha being more than just my friend? How would you feel about her being, well, a mom?" Megan's eyes widened and she tilted her head as if considering the idea. "Like, she'd live here? And be my real mom?" Hampton nodded, his heart thudding in his chest. "Yes, she'd live with us, and we'd be a family. She wouldn't replace your mom, Megan. Your mom will always be a part of us. But Natasha loves you, and she'd take care of you, just like a mom would." Megan furrowed her brows, her small face thoughtful. Then, after a moment, a bright smile spread across her lips. "I like that idea. Natasha's the best. But—" She paused, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "But what?" Hampton asked, bracing himself for her next words. Megan leaned closer, a grin spreading across her face. "If you and Natasha get married, can I be the flower guy?" Hampton blinked, then burst out laughing. "The flower guy?" "Yeah. You know, like in the weddings on TV. But I don't want to wear a dress. I'll throw the flowers, though." Hampton couldn't stop laughing as he pulled Megan into a hug. "You can absolutely be the flower guy if that's what you want." "Yay." Megan cheered, throwing her arms around her dad's neck. "So when are you going to ask her, Daddy?" "Well," Hampton said, still chuckling, "I have a plan, but you've got to keep it a secret for now. Can you do that?" Megan nodded solemnly, her face serious. "Cross my heart." As Hampton kissed the top of her head, he felt a deep sense of relief and joy. Knowing Megan was excited about the idea made him even more confident about his future with Natasha. All he had to do now was find the perfect way to ask Natasha to marry him, and make sure Megan got her wish to be the best flower guy there ever was. It was a cool, crisp morning by the duck pond where Natasha and Hampton had first reconnected. The trees around the water were golden with autumn leaves, and the quiet quacking of ducks filled the serene air. Hampton stood nervously, his hands clasping a small velvet box in his pocket. He had spent weeks planning this moment, ensuring it would be perfect, not extravagant, but meaningful, just like their love. When Natasha arrived, bundled in a cozy scarf and jacket, her face lit up as she spotted him. "Hampton, this place looks beautiful," she said, glancing at the blanket he had laid out with a small picnic basket and a vase of wildflowers. "I thought it would be nice to revisit where everything started," Hampton replied, smiling. "Sit with me." She nodded and joined him on the blanket. They talked about everything and nothing, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. After a while, Hampton took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out the velvet box. "Natasha," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I never imagined I'd find someone like you. Someone who not only healed parts of me I didn't know were broken, but also made my world brighter every single day. I love you, and I love the way you love Megan. You've become such an important part of our lives, and I can't imagine our future without you in it." Natasha's eyes widened, her breath hitching as he opened the box to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Hampton asked, his voice trembling with hope. Tears filled Natasha's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Hampton slipped the ring onto her finger and they embraced, the sound of the ducks and the rustling leaves bearing witness to their joy. In the weeks that followed, wedding preparations became a family affair. Natasha insisted that Megan be involved in everything, from choosing the flowers to taste testing the cake. The three of them spent countless evenings laughing and planning, growing closer with each passing day. One sunny afternoon, Natasha and Megan visited a bridal boutique to pick out Natasha's dress. As Natasha stepped onto the platform, the shop attendants brought out several gowns, each more beautiful than the last. Megan twirled around the shop, watching other little girls in pink dresses, giggling and spinning in delight. "Asha?" Megan asked, tugging on her sleeve. "Where's my dress?" Natasha chuckled, looking down at her. "Oh, sweetie, those are dresses for the flower girls. Remember, your dad said you didn't want to wear a dress. You're the flower guy." Megan's face scrunched in confusion. "I thought flower guy and flower girl were the same thing." Natasha laughed, realizing the mix-up. "Oh, I see now. You thought they were just different words for the same thing. Is that right?" Megan nodded solemnly. "Yeah, I want to wear a dress like them and throw flowers." Natasha knelt down, smiling warmly. "Well, I guess we can make that happen. I actually thought this might happen, so..." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small garment bag. "I brought this just in case." Megan's eyes lit up as Natasha unzipped the bag to reveal a pale pink dress with delicate lace and a satin bow. "This is for me?" Megan squealed, her face glowing with excitement. "Of course," Natasha said, "but only if you want to wear it." "I do," Megan said, hugging Natasha tightly. "Thank you, Natasha." Natasha smiled, her heart full. "You're welcome, sweetie. Now go twirl like the other girls." Megan didn't waste a second, slipping into the dress and spinning around the boutique, her laughter filling the room. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, with soft sunlight streaming over the church gardens. The gardens were adorned with flowers in shades of blush and cream, and a soft breeze carried the scent of roses and lavender through the air. Family and friends gathered in rows of white chairs, eagerly awaiting the ceremony. Megan stood near Natasha, proudly holding her flower basket and dressed in her pink gown. She twirled every few minutes, showing off her dress to anyone who would look. "I'm the flower guy," she told everyone, beaming with pride. As the music began to play, Megan took her role seriously, walking down the aisle with the utmost concentration as she scattered petals along the path. Everyone smiled at her, charmed by her enthusiasm and the adorable way she announced, "Flower guy coming through." Then it was Natasha's turn. She walked down the aisle arm in arm with her father, her white gown shimmering in the sunlight. She caught Hampton's eyes at the end of the aisle, and her heart swelled. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The ceremony was intimate and heartfelt. The minister spoke of love, commitment, and the beauty of second chances. When Hampton and Natasha exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. "I promise to love you," Hampton said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "to support you, and to cherish you every day of our lives. You've brought light into my world, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me." Natasha's voice trembled as she replied, "I promise to love you and Megan with all my heart, to build a life full of laughter and joy, and to never take for granted the love we've found. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved, and I'm so grateful for you." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Hampton kissed Natasha with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Megan cheered loudly, throwing the rest of her flower petals into the air with abandon. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and joy. Megan stole the show with her twirls on the dance floor, and when it came time for the speeches, she stood on a chair and declared, "I'm so happy Natasha's part of our family now. She makes the best cookies, and she loves my daddy and me. That's all that matters." The crowd erupted into laughter and applause, and Natasha couldn't help but pull Megan into a hug, her heart overflowing with love. As the evening wound down, Hampton and Natasha stood under the twinkling fairy lights, watching Megan chase fireflies with some of the other children. Hampton wrapped his arms around Natasha, pulling her close. "Thank you," Natasha whispered, resting her head on his chest, "for believing in us, for giving me this." Hampton kissed the top of her head. "No, thank you, for taking a chance on me, on us." In that moment, with their loved ones nearby and their hearts full, Natasha knew she had found her forever family. It wasn't the journey she had imagined for herself, but it was perfect in every way that mattered. A year after their wedding, life had settled into a happy routine for Hampton, Natasha, and Megan. Their blended family was thriving. Natasha often joked that she had 2 kids, Megan and Hampton, since both of them kept her on her toes with their playful antics. But then one morning, Natasha woke up feeling unusually exhausted. At first, she brushed it off, blaming a lingering cold or a simple virus. As days turned into weeks, her symptoms worsened. She struggled to get out of bed, energy levels plummeting to the point where even small tasks felt insurmountable. Hampton grew increasingly worried, but Natasha, ever the optimist, insisted she just needed rest. One evening, as she tried to join them for dinner, Natasha swayed on her feet, gripping the counter for support. Hampton rushed to her side, catching her before she could fall. "That's it," he said firmly. "We're going to the hospital. No more arguments." Natasha, too weak to protest, nodded silently, her skin pale and clammy. Megan, wide-eyed with concern, held Natasha's hand as Hampton helped her into the car. At the hospital, the bright lights and beeping monitors only amplified Natasha's discomfort. She felt a wave of nausea and dizziness as she was wheeled into a room. Hampton and Megan sat quietly beside her bed, their faces etched with worry. A nurse drew blood and attached an IV, while the doctor asked a series of questions about her symptoms. Hours passed in tense silence. Hampton held Natasha's hand, squeezing it gently whenever her eyes fluttered open. Megan sat quietly on his lap, sensing the seriousness of the situation, but doing her best to be brave. Finally, the door opened, and the doctor walked in, holding a clipboard. Her expression was calm, with a hint of a smile. "Mrs. Hampton," she began, "we've run several tests and we have some results. I'm going to recommend that you follow up with your OB/GYN. Natasha frowned, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why? What's wrong?" The doctor hesitated for a moment, then her smile widened. "Because, Natasha, you're pregnant." The room fell silent as the words hung in the air. Natasha's eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" she breathed, her voice cracking. "That's impossible." The doctor's smile softened. "I understand your surprise, especially considering your medical history, but the tests are conclusive. You're going to have a baby." Natasha's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. She turned to Hampton, whose jaw had dropped in shock. Megan, sitting on his lap, looked between the two of them, her brows furrowed in confusion. "Wait," Megan piped up, her small voice breaking the silence. "What's happening? Are we getting a baby?" Hampton finally found his voice, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You're going to be a big sister." Megan's eyes lit up with excitement. "A big sister? Really? That's amazing." Natasha, still overwhelmed, reached out for Hampton's hand. I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I couldn't." Hampton leaned closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "I don't know how, but it's happening," he said softly, his eyes glistening with emotion. "We're going to have a baby, Natasha. Can you believe it?" Natasha laughed through her tears, shaking her head. "No, I can't. I don't even know how to feel right now." "You don't have to figure it all out now," Hampton said, his voice steady and comforting. "We'll take it one step at a time, just like we always do, together." In the days that followed, the news slowly began to sink in. Natasha scheduled an appointment with her OB/GYN, who confirmed the pregnancy and reassured her that despite her initial weakness and exhaustion, both she and the baby were healthy. The doctor explained that hormonal changes and her body's adjustment to pregnancy likely caused her earlier symptoms. As the weeks went by, Natasha's energy returned and the family began preparing for their new addition. Megan was over the moon, constantly asking questions about the baby and insisting she help pick out names. She even started collecting her favorite toys to give to the baby, declaring they'll need these when they're big enough to play. One afternoon, as Natasha rested on the couch, Megan climbed up beside her and placed her small hands on Natasha's growing belly. "Can the baby hear me?" she asked. "Not yet," Natasha said with a smile, "but soon they will. But you can talk to them if you want to." Megan's face lit up, and she leaned close, whispering, "Hi, baby. I'm your big sister. I'm gonna take care of you, and we'll have so much fun." Hampton, watching from the doorway, felt his heart swell. He walked over and placed a hand on Natasha's shoulder, bending down to kiss her forehead. "You're amazing," he said softly. "We're amazing," Natasha corrected, her eyes shining with love. Months later, the family gathered in the nursery, putting the finishing touches on the room. The walls were painted a soft yellow, decorated with whimsical animal decals. A crib sat in the corner, adorned with a plush blanket Megan had chosen. "This is perfect," Natasha said, running her hand along the crib's edge. "I can't believe this is happening." Hampton wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "It's real, Natasha, and we're ready for it." Megan twirled in the center of the room, her excitement bubbling over. "When is the baby coming? I can't wait anymore." Natasha laughed, resting a hand on her belly. Soon, sweetie, very soon. The day finally arrived when Natasha went into labor. Hampton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. Megan waited eagerly at home with her grandparents, bouncing with excitement. When the baby was finally born, a healthy baby boy, the room filled with happy tears. Hampton kissed Natasha's forehead, his voice thick with emotion as he said, "You did it, he's perfect." When they brought the baby home, Megan rushed to meet her little brother. She peered into his face, her eyes wide with wonder. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "I'm your big sister, Megan. I told you we'd have fun." Natasha and Hampton watched the scene with full hearts, knowing their family was now complete. Despite the challenges, life had brought them to this moment, a moment of pure love and gratitude for the unexpected miracle that had brought them even closer together. It was a bright spring afternoon when Natasha decided to take the baby to the park for the first time. Megan skipped alongside her, holding a soft blanket as Natasha pushed the stroller gently down the path. The baby, now a few weeks old, dozed peacefully beneath the canopy, his tiny hands curled into fists. The trees swayed gently above them, and the air was sweet with the scent of blooming flowers. They found a quiet bench near the duck pond, the same pond where so much of Natasha's life had turned around. She sat down, adjusting the blanket around her son and smiling at Megan, who was already busy tossing crumbs to the ducks. Then, from across the park, a familiar figure stopped mid-stride. Benny. He stood frozen near the swing set, his eyes locked on Natasha and the baby. His pregnant girlfriend, now wife perhaps, was nowhere in sight. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief as he slowly approached. "Natasha?" he said cautiously. She looked up, surprised, but her expression remained calm. "Hello, Benny." His eyes dropped to the stroller. "Is that your baby?" Natasha nodded, her tone even. "Yes, his name is Caleb." Benny stared, a mix of emotions flickering across his face. Shock, maybe regret, perhaps even jealousy. "I thought you couldn't." Natasha smiled gently, brushing her fingers over Caleb's cheek. Life had other plans. There was a silence between them, not tense, but filled with everything that no longer needed to be said. Benny looked at Megan, then at the child he'd never know. "I'm happy for you," he finally said, his voice soft. "Thank you," Natasha replied simply, turning her attention back to her son. As Benny walked away, Natasha felt no bitterness, only peace. Her past was behind her. Her future was right here, cradled in her arms. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden reflections across the duck pond, Natasha sat quietly with Caleb nestled against her chest. Megan returned from feeding the ducks and leaned her head on Natasha's shoulder, content and calm. The moment was simple, yet perfect, gentle, peaceful, full of the kind of love Natasha once feared she'd never feel again. Hampton arrived a few minutes later, jogging up with 2 cups of coffee and a juice box. He kissed Natasha on the forehead, grinned at Megan, and gently touched Caleb's tiny hand. "I saw Benny," Natasha said softly. Hampton paused, searching her face. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I am. Truly," she meant it. The wounds from her past had healed, not because time had erased the pain, but because love had filled in the cracks. The heartbreak, the doubts, the fear, they had all led her here. Not to a fairy tale, but to something real. A home, a family, a second chance. As they sat together beneath the canopy of trees, the breeze brushing through their hair, Natasha looked at the people beside her and smiled. Her story wasn't what she imagined. It was better. And this, right here, was just the beginning. The end. Hope you enjoyed this wonderful story from Green Tea Tales. Help our channel grow with likes, shares, and subscribes. Thank you.